parents must have had an impact on that.
Well, they did. I mean, my parents eloped in the 10th grade. They didn't finish high school. My dad never, my mother got a GED. My dad never did. He had a 10th grade education. They both worked in factories pretty much their whole lives, with the exception of my mother. I was able to get her out of the factory, um, and into a more white collar job. But but the bills and the babies came pretty soon after they got married, and so there was a lot of financial stress on them and things like that. And I can remember a lot of conversations about money when we were just little kids, and we were supposed to be asleep, and we pretended to be asleep because you didn't want to be awake because that wasn't going to go well. And those conversations were inside using their outside voices, so to speak. And you know, I think I think a lot of kids in that place, and I might have struggled with this thought a little bit. A lot of kids would think they're a burden on their parents, and I might have thought that. But what I ultimately allowed myself to believe was that my parents needed my help, not that I was a burden. That's different. You know, it's different when you decide that you're going to believe one thing versus another. And what we decide and what we end up believing is a decision that we make. Everything's a decision. If we believe we're a burden, then that's a decision we made to believe that. If we believe something else, then we've made that decision. And so I was fortunate, and I decided to believe that my parents would that they needed my help.
So your dad had a job and your mom had a job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
my dad worked in a factory making wooden handles for hammers and axes and things like that. And I can remember going in and seeing him. He worked on this big sanding belt and everything. And I was very proud of both of my parents. Now, my dad was an alcoholic, and he wasn't a mean alcoholic. He just got really kind of silly, and I didn't like to be around him because that wasn't the dad that I knew. He was like a different person. And my mother was very choleric personality. She was the Army general mother who was very much protecting her sons. There was three of us, and she was the disciplinarian. So yeah, they had a huge impact on us. It was back in the '70s. I'm a '70s kid, and everyone had longer hair over the ears, sort of that Leif Garrett haircut. You probably wouldn't remember him, but but we were little military guys. We had the white wall haircuts, and we went to school, and my mom made our jeans and our shirts. She made all of our clothes. I grew up just wanting a pair of jeans that came from the store. I want to enforce the idea that choosing what you believe it is the critical thing. And it's a choice. You get to choose what it is you're going to believe. And so I chose to believe that my parents would benefit from my help. I wasn't a burden. And the way I could help them was to demonstrate different ways of earning money that they didn't know about. And so I didn't know about them either, but I started writing off for anything I could find. And so my mom, I was always the one of the three kids that went to the grocery store with my mother on Friday to spend the paycheck on groceries. And so I started looking for those business opportunity magazines in the magazine rack. I didn't have the money to buy one, but I would sneak it in the cart hoping my mom would pay for it. And she never did. But one day, the lady who was at the checkout, because they had to key everything in at that time, she saw that, and she just, covered it herself. She paid for it herself. And I got it home, and I read everything, and I mailed off for everything I could. And so I started selling shoes where I could make a commission. And I also discovered that my mom, she worked in a ball cap factory, and she sewed the hats on the ball caps. Well, sometimes there were some imperfections, and so they'd get tossed in this big cardboard box. And my mom would bring them home, and we'd wear them. We lived in farm country, so everybody wore a hat like that when I was a kid. But the kids at school started asking me, "Hey, where'd you get that hat? Can you get me one?" So my mother could get those for 25 cents. And so I started buying those from my mom, and I was taking them to school and selling them for $1. So I was making a pretty good margin there. And I'll never forget the day I told my mom, "Hey, I don't need an allowance anymore." Because in my mind, I'm helping them because they don't have to give me any money. And my mom asked me, "Where's all that money coming from?" Because I didn't tell her I was selling the hats at school. Um, and so I told her what I was doing and that I didn't need an allowance anymore. And she put the money back in her purse and she said, "That's fine, but you're still going to wash the dishes."
Still got to earn your keep here.
You still have to do your part. So that was my first profit center. And
That's
yeah,
great.
that's
The
where that all started.
entrepreneur right there. So I know you have experience out in business. So why don't we skip ahead to where you went from the W-2
Mm-hmm.
to owning a business?
Yeah, my business stuff started with real estate. So it was in the late 80s that I took a real interest in real estate and rental property and things like that and renovating houses, etc. So in the late 80s, I bought my first house in 1988, right after I started my job out of college. So I had some credit and I could actually borrow money. Um, it wasn't the best deal in the world, but I made a little profit. And I remember my interest rate was 12%. So we're all complaining about 5 or 6, today as the time of this recording here. But it was 12% interest back then. And I can remember 16, 17% interest on mortgages even. So I bought a house then and I accumulated rental property and things like that. I did that all in parallel to my W-2 jobs, building my career. And then in 2005, I had an opportunity to buy a business after having gone through several corporate jobs. I bought a business in 2005. And I learned a lot from the real estate business and how to put transactions together. And I did it basically for the business, much like I did for, the way I would buy houses, because I learned to buy houses with much less of my own money. And I bought this business. Was doing 700,000 in sales at the time, and when I say we, I was able to hire some good people. So I put a good team together. We built that to about 8 million in sales, and then I exited from that in 2015 when my parents both just age and working in factories and things like that, their health started to decline pretty rapidly. And so I took a couple of years off and I really spent those 2 years with my parents, my mom and dad, through their final season of life.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and today, I enjoy helping other business owners to be successful. I really, navigate through the obstacles, and it's just a lot of fun for me. A lot of business owners have challenges that are, um, to them, they seem overwhelming, but they're really, some of them can be, pretty gnarly to solve, but most of them, they're just not, you know.
Yeah. So what do you do today?
Well, I work as a business advisor, helping business owners to improve their profitability and by significantly improve profitability, by the way. So, and my clients are any they're anywhere from 1 million to 20 million in revenue, generally in that range. The biggest client I've had was about 3 billion. That was a while ago. It was about 10 years ago. But I like the smaller businesses. Um, they tend to be able to make quicker decisions, et cetera, and so on. They don't have boards and committees to make decisions. They can make decisions a little quicker.
Yeah.
So,
What
yeah.
are some of the things that you do to turn businesses around and increase profitability?
Help them implement strategies that are very executable in chunks of time. Um, you know,
Like
Probably
what's
no
one
surprise we work.
strategy?
What's that?
Oh, like what's one strategy, for instance?
One might be messaging. So, if you ask most business owners what they do, they'll tell you, well, I own Acme Manufacturing. We've been family owned for 20 years, that sort of thing. Nobody really cares about that.
Sure.
They just don't care. What the brain wants to know is what can you do for me? That's number one. Number two, how long will it take me to experience the result? Number three, what do I have to give you of my time and money? And then number four, now that I have that information, what do you want me to do? What action do you want me to take? And so getting the messaging right is one of, over 50 strategies that we help to implement. Because most of what you see in advertising and on websites and things like that is very focused on the owner and the company, and it's usually driven by ego, and nobody cares that you've been family owned since 2000, or that you've been a finalist for the Malcolm Baldrige Award. That's all nice, but it
Yeah.
doesn't tell your potential customers what you can do for them.
Yeah. People really just want to know, like, what can you do for me? Like,
Yeah,
why should I even take my time here? So,
yeah, that's right. That's right. So
no,
that's a fundamental strategy we help them with.
okay. Yeah, that's great. I really enjoy your industry because I think entrepreneurs or small business owners can get really lost, right? Trying to spin all the plates that it takes, like to really get a business profitable and going. And if are trying to grow at this point, um, or if they're trying to exit, like there's so many hats that a lot of small business owners wear, where once you get in those bigger ones, they hired someone for all those pieces, right? And so there's
Mm-hmm.
just a lot of stress and weight that goes on small business owners. So I really
Yeah,
like your industry.
yeah. There's a couple, maybe three mistake. These are the common mistakes that are absolutely avoidable that most business owners make or are making on a regular basis. So I'll give you these. Number one is they're very focused on profit. Now that's important. We got to be profitable, but cash flow is even more important. Profit is a theory, cash flow is a fact. Okay. And so those are two very different things. Um, the other is the business owners way too often do minimum wage work. It's really tragic. Go to the one thing with Gary Keller. That's a great place to start to stop doing things you shouldn't be doing. And then and the third thing is serving the right people for the right purpose. Um, because I just have this real loathing and disdain for hyperbole, and so I think it's in Ephesians. I think it's chapter 3 where Paul writes to the church of Ephesus about how important it is to not lie, number one, and be clear. And it basically says, don't puff things up. Just say things like they are and be honest and don't lie. And you know, those three things are pretty important.
If you like that clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. If you want to watch the entire interview, click right here.